Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to NCSA's latest webinar. Today, we are talking about specialized schooling, which is a very important topic, of course. I've had two kids who've gone through specialized schools for autism, and they play an incredibly important role in our children's development and in their therapy and for our families. So I've been sick, so I'm not going to say very much. I'm going to turn it over to today's moderator, who is Aaron Parsons. And Aaron Parsons wears two hats, which he will describe. And he is here with three other professionals from Kennedy Krieger and their programs providing education in various settings. In terms of the Q&A and chat, you can use either. It's easier for me to monitor Q&A, but I will definitely look at chat if I have the bandwidth to do so. We'll ask questions along the way if necessary, but for the most part, I think we will handle questions towards the end. This webinar should take about 75 minutes, give or take. All right, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron Parsons. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill, and hello, everyone. I do look a little formal, but that's just because I was late coming home from work today. We've got a presentation for you that's a slide deck, but we really are also interested in just having a conversation, answering questions, and seeing if we can be helpful. So our organization, we're from Kennedy Krieger Institute. We're a children's hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. We're a little unusual that we're research, rehabilitation, outpatient services, and we also run schools, specialized schools. So at this point, we have 5 schools across the state of Maryland. We serve just under 500 students, the majority of whom have autism. We serve a broad range of students. I just talked with our senior management about our graduating class, and we have students who are, looking at fully assisted living and assistance, in their daily lives through 5 of our students who are enrolled in a community college starting this fall. So it's very broad, but we do serve students with severe autism and moderate. So we've got a lot of experience in different areas. Today, we're going to try to give a little bit of our perspective as providers and also members of a national association. That'll all kind of come out on this PowerPoint. But again, if you've got questions, please register them. We'll either answer them during the presentation or after. And if something crops up a little later, you've got a thought, please send it to Jill and we'll do our best to answer it. So I'm going to do my best now to share my screen. We switched organizationally from Zoom to Teams, and I've been confused ever since. So if I make some mistakes, please bear with me. All right, I believe I was successful.
Yes, you were.
Okay, great. Today we're going to talk about finding highly specialized school programs. We're going to do that from the perspective as Kennedy Krieger school programs and institute providers, but also members of a national organization who are familiar with multiple schools across the United States. So this quote underneath is actually one of the folks I'm going to introduce. She just kind of put that on the slide, and I thought that really kind of sums it up. This is a very individualized process, but we know there are some key components, we believe, that should be a part of any school program for students with moderate to severe autism. All right, I managed to make it go forward. So again, I'm Aaron Parsons. I'm a special educator. I've been in special education for, I don't want to admit it, but well over 30 years. I started off in private residential settings and then worked for the last 23 years here at Kennedy Krieger Institute. I'm a vice president. I'm in charge of portions of the school programs and then also our adult services program. So that's something we recently did. We opened an adult agency and serve not only our graduates, but graduates transitioning youth from other schools like ours. With me today is Sandra Jenkins. She's an educational director in our K-8 program. Also, Tasha Geiger, a clinical psychologist who's worked actually K through 12 for us and is now working in the K-8 program, but consults all over. And Catherine Miller, who is our educational director for our high school program that serves students from ninth grade to 21 years of age. They exit both with a certificate of completion or a diploma. We do provide everything that's needed for diploma to earn a diploma from 14 different local school systems here in Maryland. So it's a pretty broad reach. Here are our goals today. We want to briefly discuss the search for specialized schools. I'm not familiar with everyone who's in the audience, but I suspect most of you are familiar with this. Is where it starts, but it bears mentioning. We want to talk about resources for identifying specialized schools. We want to describe the components that we believe that should be present in those schools. And that's really our perspective as providers for Kennedy Krieger Institute and our school program. So we're going to talk about where to go looking if you're looking for a specialized school setting. And then based on our perspective, our provision of special education services, the components that we think you should be seeing in these schools if you believe that school is the right fit for you. So if you've got questions, please ask them, because I know that any business that you're in or field that you specialize in, you can begin to talk in sort of lingo and not recognize it. So if there's something that's not clear, please put that question up and we'll do our best to explain our perspective. And finally, we just want to answer questions and assist families. So I mentioned that we're part of a national association, NAPSAC. I'm the public policy chair for NAPSAC, so I'm involved in policy discussions, suggestions, sometimes pleading in Washington, D.C. for a national association. NAPSAC is the National Association of Private Special Education Centers. And here's a description. I won't read it to you, obviously, but this slide deck will be available. What's important about NAPSAC is that we are an alternative for settings that a lot of parents aren't familiar with. We're not necessarily just private school settings. Schools like Kennedy Krieger schools are actually publicly funded and privately operated. So we're often referred to as a non-public school, which is confusing in itself on many levels. But what's important about NAPSAC is that we have about 200 members across the United States. And then we're also affiliated with a council of state associations, also schools like ours across the United States, that increases that membership to about 800 programs. So I'm going to show you today how you can take a look at any of these programs. I will caution that a lot of the information that we can provide is very regional. Access to these kind of programs can vary greatly from state to state. And obviously that's something that we would like to see change. We'd like to see access to these programs more universally, but more on NAPSAC to come. So parents looking for a specialized school setting. I'm sure that if you're a parent on here, you've already experienced the IEP or perhaps the ISFP for younger children. And that is how all of our students find their way to our schools. Although some students find their way to NAPSAC schools in a completely private route, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well. Many parents don't have access to the resources to take that private route, but those students are often served on an ISP, just an individualized service plan. But we know the battle that can happen for students with more complex needs. And that's the discussion about least restrictive environment, serving a student in their local school system, which of course we do value. Having a student in the least restrictive setting is of course our goal. And when we have students who do transition back, we're very pleased. It's a celebration. But often the discussion can mean sometimes a delay to a referral to a setting that meets the student's needs. And we know that many of our parents, by the time they reach us, have been battling the LRE discussion for quite a while. And so it's usually parents, advocates, and attorneys, or some combination of the three that bring children to us. We are partners with the local school systems, as are most NAPSEC members serving publicly funded students. But the driver to bring those students to us are generally the parents. That, of course, means data, the paper trail. There's a number of organizations who can help you with this, depending on where you are in the process. But data that demonstrates that your child is not receiving free and appropriate public education, that they're not accessing FAPE. And that opens the door to the discussion about placements outside of the public setting. And that's where you begin to talk about non-public placement in your school, sometimes a separate day placement in a local school system. But that's, really how you get there. Once you've reached that part in the discussion, for most folks, that's reaching the central IEP table. How do you explore your options? The local school systems, if that's the route you're taking, may, provide you three names, and you may or may not be familiar with those three. And you may want to know what's out there, what's more, what do I think is going to meet my child's needs? Well, that's where I want to draw us back to the National Association for Private Special Education Centers and CASA, their affiliates. So again, this is highly regional, and I didn't provide links in all of these, but I've got an important link I'm going to show you there. Each one of these state associations and NAPSEC centrally, NAPSEC is headquartered in Washington, D.C. That's purposeful to have access to the Hill so that we can go and advocate. There's a CEO, her name is Danielle Johnson. She answers email. If a parent emails NAPSEC, they will get a response. But NAPSEC, or one of the affiliate members, is a great place to start looking at school options if you're looking for a specialized setting. So again, this link will be available, and I'm going to have to stop sharing here and share again here. Was I successful, fellow presenters?
Yes, yes,
All right.
indeed.
I'm rusty with Zoom, so I won't dive through the whole thing, but you can see, and I actually found a problem today poking around here with the search engine, but I happen, as I mentioned, to know the CEO, so I'll get this corrected shortly. But you can choose a state. I'm just going to go with Maryland. I'm not going to check any of the accreditations because I just want to pull everything up. Take a search, and you'll begin to see member schools. Some provide pretty detailed descriptions, others do not. But this is a good place to start in your state. It appears to me that some of the filters are not working. For instance, some of the information, this is one of our programs, Kennedy Krieger school programs. We should have a little more information. We should be searchable. So I'll work on that software glitch. But what's important is a lot of them have their own websites on here that you can dive into to start looking around. So that's going to take you to those 200 members. But remember, in addition, that the Council of Affiliated State Associations brings us up to about 800 members. Now, those are limited. You'll have to see if there's one in your state. Not all of the state associations are members of NAPSEC. So take a peek, look for a state affiliation or association for private or non-public special education schools. And then they tend to have directory resources and can help you start locating schools. I'm going to stop the share here and jump back. All right. Am I successful again?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, great. I'm feeling more confident now, my Zoom ability. So that's one of the resources for parents who are looking just to identify programs in your area that you think you might be interested in taking a look at, that you think they might meet your children's needs. If you're a parent who is in the situation where you really lack resources that are nearby, and you're in the position where you may be able to seek assistance from another profession, and this is a little different than advocacy. The Independent Education Consultants of America. This is a group that I used to work with before coming to Kennedy. And this link, I won't open it up but when you see the slide deck, it'll open up to their website. But an educational consultant, if you're not familiar with them, their assistant really ranges. People are most familiar with them helping students looking at post-secondary choices. I want my son to go to an Ivy League school. That's sort of the story of educational consultants. But a lot of the work they do is around students with special needs, and a lot of the consultants specialize in that. What's really great about the IECA credential, that's what I would recommend you look for an educational consultant, is that they visit programs. So when I was working in private special education, we would have usually a yearly visit of educational consultants who would come and really examine everything. So it's almost like an approval agency, but again, it's private consultants coming, but they want to know if your school is the right fit for their clients. So this is a really good resource. Again, unfortunately, it does take personal resources from the family to hire these consultants. Again, I would strongly recommend looking for this credential. You can find educational consultants who don't have the credential, who are not a member, but sort of personal backgrounds and credentials, sort of higher ed credentials, can really vary for educational consultants. So definitely do your homework. This is the first place that I would advise that you look if you're interested in an educational consultant. The other association that I work closely with is ACRC. Now, if you're a parent who's ever considered a residential setting, and that's something that an educational consultant can definitely help you with. But if you're looking at resources around residential settings and community-based programming as well, ACRC offers resources for parents, including papers describing what should be present in programming, cautions about programming that they do not believe is appropriate for certain students. So again, I'll see if I can do the quick share.
Yeah, you'll probably have to unshare and then reshare. Yeah.
You would think after COVID, I would have all this down. But just so you can take a quick look, resources for families, they're very family friendly. And they have got some stuff here for families considering a residential program. I know that's a really tough decision for parents. I've helped parents make that decision before, and I've seen that be the absolutely correct decision both for the parent and the student. And these are some folks that I recommend as a resource if you're considering that, in addition to the consultants. Stop that share.
It just occurred to me that we will have some people listening just to the audio. So could you just tell me the website for both the NABSEC and the one you just showed?
Yeah, if I leave the slide deck up, will you leave the slide deck up? You should have hyperlinks right in there. Is that available to folks?
Yeah, but I just could, I think is it napsec.org?
Yeah, it's napsec.org, NAPSEC.org.
And then ACRC is
togetherthevoice.org.
Togetherthevoice.org. Okay.
Togetherthevoice.org.
What I'll try to do is put things in the show notes, right? So people can just click on the links. Some people do listen just by audio on our podcast. It's the only reason.
Understood. Great.
Okay.
Thanks for letting me know. And again, Jill's got our contact information. If there's something we say or that we said and you think about it later, Jill, please feel free. You can direct them to me and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
So that's just sort of a kind of broad and quick overview about how you might go about looking for a specialized school setting. And there are many. There are many specialized school settings. Some states obviously have a denser number. New Jersey, for instance, has, I think, still the most in the nation. But once you begin the search and you start to look at schools, part of what we think is important is knowing what to look for in the school. And this runs from some things that are pretty technical. And I think that you'll hear well, actually all three folks talk about some of these more technical aspects, but other things that are just things that I would call an observation or things that you're going to notice. And so this is, as Kennedy Krieger School programs, these are components that we use. These are components that we believe should be present in all schools. But we know that, based on the reach of this association, that the audience is national and that the likelihood that you've got access to a Kennedy Krieger School program is low. So we know that you're going to be looking for programs in different places, different states. So what we want to do is formally let you know what we think you should be looking for, when you're looking at the schools, reading the websites, visiting the schools, talking to the employees, asking sometimes for some odd things like their calendar. Sandy will talk a little bit about that. But from the Kennedy Krieger perspective of how to run a highly specialized program, we believe these are the indicators that you should be looking for. So on that note, I'm going to drop to the first slide and I'll turn it over to Sandy. And Sandy, if you just tell me next slide, I will move on.
Will do. So I'm Sandy Jenkins, and like Aaron shared, I'm the Director of Education at Kennedy Krieger's kindergarten through 8th grade school in Baltimore, Maryland. And I am hoping that we provide helpful information. I would be ecstatic if we affirm that you already have a quality education placement. And I apologize in advance if my dog barks or my cat walks across the screen. I, like Aaron, am steps away from COVID and Zoom times. And I think while I'm accustomed to doing things virtually, my cat and my dog are not. So I'm crossing my fingers. So one of the things that you need to look for is, does the school provide a comprehensive approach? Are they looking at your student from all facets? Are they addressing academic, communication, social, behavioral, therapeutic, daily living skills, vocational needs that your student may have? And are they integrating those approaches throughout the student's day? So if you think about something like communication doesn't happen just in isolation in a speech language pathologist's office. Is that approach and is that practice integrated through the student's programming throughout the day? Is that practice and that assistive technology device used throughout the day and throughout the school year? And then all of those areas come with hosts of specialized professionals. And so do those specialized professionals like the speech language pathologist, the special educator, the BCBA, the occupational therapist, they should be meeting and teaming regularly about students' programming, and they should be integrated in and out of that classroom. So when you look in a classroom, you should see a special educator, the paraprofessionals there to support. And it's not uncommon to walk down, actually, it's common to walk through our classrooms and you'll see the special educator and the paraprofessionals, and there's a BCBA in the classroom working with students, or an occupational therapist is doing a push-in in the classroom, because it's part of that integration in the classroom that really creates that team and that knowledge of that student programming that's so critical. All the programming should be individualized to the student, and you can see this in a classroom when you walk through a school. You should be able to see different visuals for students, different seating arrangements, different areas, different earning systems. So a student may have a token board, another student may have a first then, and they can all be in the same classroom together. And so really looking that the program is not a one size fits all, that there's multiple curriculums at use, that they're really able to tailor the program to your students' individual needs. You got it, Aaron? There we go. Parent involvement. So this is something that I'm particularly passionate about, and we work really hard at our school to have an active parent community. And so there's the involvement in the IEP meetings. There's involvement in the, back to school night. I hear my dog. Oh no. There she goes. There's involvement in back to school night. There's involvement in parent conferences. And then is there a parent association? Are there opportunities to volunteer? And then there should be regular systems for parents to communicate, collaborate, and problem solve with the school. At our school programs, our students have mental health case managers. That's kind of the liaison for family communication with the school. So a parent can reach out at any time, reach that mental health case manager, and that mental health case manager will connect the parent with the team members that can help work through that issue. And then this is something just to kind of note, the school should always listen and always value what parents have and bring to the table. But like any healthy relationship, there's going to be another side sometimes and another different perspective. And it's really important that you listen to a school and that you work with a school that is comfortable telling you uncomfortable things, because you want to have that honest and open dialogue with a school. And that's really where you'll get down and do that deep problem solving for your students. So you've got to be able to nudge the school, and the school's got to be able to hear the nudge. It's often parents nudge us in a direction or bring something in a direction, or sometimes say things that are uncomfortable for us to hear. And they're the right things for us to hear. And so that kind of works both ways. And it's, if you just think about what does it take to have a healthy relationship, that's what you want with your school. You want to have open, honest communication with an active listening. And with that comes sometimes uncomfortable conversations. The school should have specialized facilities that meet your students' needs, and there should be the therapeutic spaces. There should be spaces for calming, for breaks, for movement. The community spaces should be accessible. And a lot of times when folks think about accessible spaces, they're thinking mobility, but it really goes beyond that. You should think about your student's needs. For instance, we have a number of students that have AT devices for communication, like I was sharing earlier. And we noticed that it's really difficult to run and play on a playground for a little first grade or second grader to play on a playground with an iPad hanging around, their neck. They're heavy and they're bulky. And so we posted big, giant communication boards on our playground. So if the student needs to set down their AT device so they can run and play and swing and do all those things that kids need to do, that there's still a really accessible way for them to communicate. And so I just challenge you to think about, like, when you think about accessible spaces, like another thing is the size of the cafeteria. We happen to have a smaller cafeteria, so students can go to the cafeteria, experience the cafeteria, practice all those skills that you learn sitting in a group eating environment. There's a lot, but there's less students in there. There's less people in there, so it's not as loud as a typical cafeteria. There's not as much movement. And so really kind of thinking about those types of accessibility features for students. And then classrooms designed for unique learners, like seating, differentiated seating, differentiated desks, differentiated visuals. Some classrooms may have break spaces built in. Some classrooms may have a trampoline for movement in them. So the classroom spaces themselves should be tailored and individualized for the students. And here's some kind of additional, like just nuggets, things to look for. Low student teacher ratio, small class sizes, that's kind of a common element. But calendar and the length of this school year. And so, a lot of programs offer ESY, and that's appropriate for a lot of students, but not for every student. And so, like, one of the things that we do at Kennedy Krieger is we run an 11-month school year. And so our students run a typical calendar, and then they come the month of July. And that month of July is the start of our school year. So students are with their new teachers, their new peers, and it's a dedicated month where we run a typical academic schedule. But within that, we really have time to explicitly teach things like routines, transitions. How does this classroom walk to music class? What does this classroom do in the cafeteria? How does this classroom take a restroom break? All of those things are explicitly taught in a time of year where it's a little slower, a little calmer, and so that in August, when students come back, we're ready to roll. And then here's one, this is one when we were preparing for this, and I thought about this element. I wondered if we asked our parents at our school if they were thrilled with our solution. I don't know if they would be or not. But so the dedicated time to train staff and for staff to meet and team. And so what we do is our students leave about 1 o'clock on Wednesdays through the school year, and that gives us a couple of hours built in each week for teams to meet, to think about programming for students, and for us to provide training. And so my school in particular, we have about 130 paraprofessionals. That's a lot of paraprofessionals that we have to provide training for. We have to make sure that they know student protocols. We know that we have to make sure that they know all the proper behavioral communication techniques. And so that's our dedicated time every week to provide that training and practice for those students. And I think while it's critical for us, it does provide, I will say, a little hardship for our families because there's student care that's different than your typical school day on those Wednesdays. That's why I'm curious of what our parents would say about that. And then just knowledgeable staff. Do the staff seem to know what they're talking about? Do they know appropriate therapeutic techniques? Do they know appropriate behavior, the behavior techniques and methodologies? So the folks that you're working with should know what they're doing.
Thank you, Sandy. Sandy runs a great school program. Parents are very satisfied. I know that the Wednesday is a hardship, but that was one that I hadn't thought of to prospective parents, was to ask to see the calendar, check it out, look the staff calendar, look and see how they're training their staff and how dedicated they are to that training. So next we're gonna
Can I buzz in with a little question? This is sort of one of my bugaboos about specialized schools, which you mentioned a mental health case manager, right? Which is something I almost never see in some of these non-public schools. And I think I'm not exactly sure what you meant by mental health case manager, but what I see too often are children with highly disruptive, highly dysregulated behaviors that really require attention from a psychiatric professional, a medical professional. The treatment is not, it's not a school issue, right? The school is addressing issues that are really psychiatric in nature. So I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, one of the things that we are extremely fortunate to have is on both mine and Katie's campuses, we have psychiatry professionals that are there full-time on our campus. And so when we run into issues that are psychiatric in nature, the professional may not be the treating psychiatrist for the student, may or may not be the treating psychiatrist for the student. We've got the expertise in the building to help guide us on how we should navigate whatever that challenge is. The mental health case manager is typically a social worker, and they're really skilled and they're experts on how, like, connecting families with resources, making sure that the communication through the team happens appropriately. Like, what are those outside resources that we may not offer but are in the community, or even things as simple as is there an adaptive, we happen to have a great adaptive hockey team in our area. How do you get connected with the Baltimore Saints? Those kinds of things the mental health case manager can connect with. But we do have psychiatrists in our program.
and
I was just going to mention that part of our programs is a 3-prong approach. So for each student, the educational case manager is going to be your child's homeroom teacher. The mental health case manager is typically the social worker, like Sandy described. In addition to that, each child has either behavior analyst or a behavioral services case manager who really focuses on the behavioral aspects. And the benefit that we've seen from that approach is that the three case managers work together to make really sound decisions for the child's programming. Because I am a trained teacher, but certainly don't have the hours of experience of social work or through behavior analysts. So the three work together and do the communication with the family, come together to team and help make decisions. And then, like Sandy said, if there's something going on that's outside the scope of all three case managers, then we do have the ability to consult with the med director or some of the docs who often do have releases to speak to the treating doc if need be. I'm sure a lot of you are aware that some of the really important medications are not readily available right now. So we'll see a student who's maybe experiencing unmedicated period, and we're able to consult on, the best ways to address that. So I just wanted to kind of mention that three-pronged approach.
Yeah, thank you.
And speaking of a clinical approach, now we're going to turn it over to Dr. Geiger, and I'll shift screens here. Tasha.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us to speak tonight. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I also work at the school with Sandy at Kennedy Krieger, so the K through 8 in Baltimore. I've also worked at our high school program, Katie. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more in detail about some of the key components of a highly specialized school for students with severe autism, intellectual disability, and talk a bit more about some of the components that Sandy was bringing up. So whether you're developing a school or you're looking for an appropriate school for your child, here's some kind of in broad strokes the things that you would want to be looking for or that might be helpful to develop in your program. So Sandy did speak about how having programming that's comprehensive is really important. So our goals addressing academics, communication, social play and leisure, adaptive behavior, and motor behavior. It's important to have all of those components.
And what behavior? The last one got a little garbled.
Adaptive behavior and motor development also.
Motor, okay.
Yep. And leisure is really important too, especially for individuals with more severe forms of autism, trying to find ways to engage them during downtime and find leisure activities that they enjoy and that they're able to do, and setting it up so they're successful with that. Making sure that the goals and the programming is developmentally appropriate. So if you have an 8th grader or a 3rd grader, you do always want that school district representative or that parent or that teacher saying, so the 8th grade curriculum goal in this area is this. The 3rd grade curriculum goal in this area is this. And you always want to have that in mind as you're programming for your students. But you also want to think about how are we going to achieve that goal. So maybe an appropriate goal for a student would be that they're doing math word problems. And maybe your child or your student is not yet at that level to complete that goal independently. So in taking a developmental approach, thinking about what skills does my child or student need in order to accomplish that goal, and making sure that those prerequisite steps are met. So rather than having a goal that might not be appropriate for them, you can keep that goal in mind and make sure you're working towards it by completing the prerequisite steps. For example, by making sure your student can count, can sequence numbers, can do rote counting, can do quantity to number correspondence. So knowing that a number 3 equals 3 objects and a number 8 equals 8 objects. Making sure they can identify numbers and expressively and receptively. Make sure they have all those good prerequisite skills before you build up to addition or subtraction or word problems. The next thing I believe is really important when you're talking about goals for some of our students who have more moderate and severe forms of autism or intellectual disability, is making sure the goals and the programming that the individuals are working on can be mastered independently. And it may take a while, and there may be little sections that the student may work on one year that you'll build on the next year. But at the end of the year, you'll want to make sure that your students have been able to accomplish their goals independently. So there may be steps to that independent demonstration of the academic skill or the language skill or the social skill. So you might build in prompting, you might build in scaffolding, you might build in visual supports. But at the end, once you reach all of the objectives, the last one, the overall goal should be that the student can demonstrate that skill independently, because that's what's going to be most meaningful for them in interacting with the world and outside of the classroom as well. Which kind of brings me to the next component that you'll want to look for in programming for your child or for your students is that the goals are really meaningful to the students and their quality of life. And I think a lot about communication goals and how important that is to our students, and also making sure to address those adaptive behavior goals. So those positive learning behaviors, doing routines, doing self-care, independently engaging in leisure. I have a kindergartner actually who asked me what I did at work. And I was trying to think about how to best answer that for a kindergartner. And I was thinking, I work with this amazing team, and we write functional behavior assessments and behavior plans, and we develop individualized curriculum for students, and we work together to train other professionals and I collaborate with specialists. But the answer I came up with at like 7:15 in the morning when I'm dropping off my son is, I help children with autism learn how to talk and do things on their own. And that kind of made me think about what goals are really meaningful to choose, especially for some of our learners with these more moderate and severe forms of autism and intellectual disability, is can they learn, and how can we help them learn to tell us what they want, to communicate for themselves, to let us know what they want, what they don't want, what they want more of, what they want to stop, and to be able to do so on their own with consistency, with clarity, so that we know what they need and we can honor their wishes. So that is a skill that I think is essential to programming that can really improve the quality of life and these individuals with autism, their well-being, and show them how to advocate for themselves. I also wanted to talk a little bit, Sandy described how collaborative the educational team is, and of course the parents being an important component of that educational team, that you do have a lot of specialists available to you at the school, and that they collaborate in a way that can really maximize the students' independence and progress. So I think Sandy did a really nice job talking about how you really want the goal. You don't so much want everyone to be working on their separate goals. You kind of want to come together as a team and decide what the goals for the student are for the year. And then everyone kind of works on their goals and brings their own expertise to accomplishing that goal. And for individuals with more severe autism or intellectual disability, that is a really important point that Sandy was talking about. 1 or 2 sessions a month or 2 sessions a week might not bring about the kind of independence and outcomes that we're looking for. But instead, if the team is all working together on the same goal, kind of figuring out what the student can work on every day in the classroom and throughout the day, and have that integrated programming, I think is essential for students on the autism spectrum and with their style of learning. As a team member for the parents out there, you are a critical role in treatment planning. And not only do you have that involvement with the school, partnering with the school in terms of caring for your family member, but you can and you should just insist on being trained to implement many aspects of their programming so that we can just extend our treatment gains to other settings as well. Won't get too technical, but I will just talk a little bit also about specifically behavior support. Our school, and hopefully if you're looking for a school for your child, you would want to look for behavior programming that's characterized by positive behavior supports and interventions. So you're going to want to look for a program that works very hard on what you do before you see a problem behavior. So what are all the things we can put in place in our school, in our classrooms, that the research tells us helps prevent problem behaviors? And let's just kind of have that be our nice baseline across the school and focus a lot of our energy on what you do before you see a problem behavior. Another component that you might look for is that if your student, your child, has significant or challenging behaviors that are not being managed well by the school-wide system or the class-wide system, that they have an individual plan. And doing function-based assessment really is best practices in the schools these days. So I'm sure you're very familiar with that. And what I mean by that is that you're considering why the student's showing a problem behavior. So if one student is showing an aggressive behavior because they want to avoid or escape an activity that they don't like, and another student is showing an aggressive behavior maybe because they want access to a preferred item or activity, that those two students would have different plans that are based on why that student is showing that problem behavior. So not only is the behavior plan function-based, but there should also be a focus on teaching of replacement behaviors that will replace those problem behaviors. So if the student is demonstrating a problem behavior because they want to get out of an activity, there should be a focus on teaching that student how to get out of the activity appropriately. So teaching them wonderful communication skill. If that student is aggressive because they want access to an item or an activity, then there should be an emphasis on teaching another communication skill of trying to ask for those items or activities rather than showing a problem behavior in order to access it. I think also it's important to make sure that the school emphasizes prevention and the use of least restrictive interventions. So a lot of times when I would talk with families in outpatient setting, or when I talk with physicians about the behavior plan that their patient might have at the school setting, I always ask them to kind of check it out. Is it a 4-page behavior plan? If so, are 3.5 pages focused on preventing the problem behavior? And then just that one last half page tells you what to do if you tried all those efforts and the problem behavior still happened. So really emphasizing what to do ahead of time to prevent the problem behavior from occurring. And then also, like Katie was talking about, how our school has the 3-pronged approach for significant problem behaviors and for help acquiring new skills for students with autism. Having some expertise in the school with applied behavior analysis is also recommended. And in terms of autism treatment and behavior management, just talk for one quick sec about treatment and different interventions. There's a lot, there's so many, it's hard to keep up with all of them. But what to look for in your school is that there is a focus on outcomes, that your team is really using data to drive their programming. So you don't have to necessarily keep up with the latest trends and treatments. Usually what works are some of the tried and true strategies where you've got 10, 20, 30, 50, 60 years of research. A lot of those strategies work really well in teaching new academic skills, behavior skills, self-help skills, motor skills to children with intellectual disabilities and autism. I did put a link, a website. It's the Association for Science and Autism Treatments. It's asatonline.org. And if you're interested in looking there, there's a lot of resources for educators, for parents. But there's also a description of different treatments. And it gives you a little snapshot of which treatments have a lot of evidence and research to support their use, which treatments have some evidence and aren't yet considered evidence-based, and then what interventions have no support that they're useful. But what's good about that website also is if you are a parent interested in trying an intervention that maybe there's not much support for, there are some guides there about how to do that kind of thoughtfully and planfully, what kind of questions to ask and what to look for in terms of outcome if you are trying one of those strategies. I think, yeah. No, Sandy, if you wanted to talk about this slide a bit, this is the National Standards Project, I think 2015, and it's been updated a bit recently, but it outlines some of the evidence-based teaching strategies that are important for students with autism. And
can you zoom in just a little bit? I guess on the blue part especially, it's a little hard to read.
Yeah, some of those are behavioral teaching strategies that have evidence to support their use in helping children with autism learn social communication and academic skills. And one thing that kind of comes out is that applied behavior analysis really has substantially more scientific support than other behavioral or educational interventions for children with autism. And so it really is recommended that families and professionals do strongly consider using ABA approaches and be a bit cautious about other approaches, and when using those, to do them kind of thoughtfully and use data to help you make decisions about what's working and what's not working. And so
Jill, I'm not
yeah.
able to blow the screen up, but again, we can send this particular slide out to attendees if they'd like to see this. It's a nice matrix that just lays out evidence-based practices and then components you should be looking for.
Yeah,
And
we can put the slide deck on our website. Thanks.
And there are a variety of teaching strategies that have a lot of support. But what to think about as a parent is, what is the developmentally appropriate and meaningful goal? Did my student make progress? And can the student demonstrate that skill independently? So that's kind of a great broad framework to be thinking about, regardless of the intervention strategies that you're using or focusing on.
And I like this screen. I also see a question in the chat that I think we can answer, but Tasha, had a fairly complex description of components that you should be looking for in your child's school, but this is also what she described when she said you should be looking for in a school. And Tasha, I'll leave that to you, but I just thought it was important with the very technical and clinical that this is also on your mind.
Yeah, just kind of in broad strokes. You want that creative, compassionate intervention. You want to be focused on observable, measurable, academic and behavioral outcomes. And you really want to make sure those goals are emphasizing communication, independence, and overall well-being. And so I think communication helps with that overall well-being because it can foster social inclusion and self-determination, some of those really important quality of life aspects for everyone, but especially for persons with intellectual disabilities.
Thank you. And I see a question in the chat. It just popped up about keeping kids safe, being a full-time job, safety protocols. Certainly you should see safety protocols that are um, both regarding student behavior, but also, sort of the roof to basement safety protocols for the school. All those should be available for you. And things that you should look for, again, is going back to Sandy's calendar, is that that the staff are trained, that they're regularly trained, that the training requires the staff to demonstrate proficiency rather than just being approved. So that generally means that there's testing, both testing that's observed and testing that may be written. So I can let you know that there's a lot of different associations or groups out there selling crisis management training programs. Those are a small part of it. That's also what Tasha was talking about, that really, 90% of the work should be preventative, but that last 10% is absolutely critical. And so annual trainings, demonstrations of proficiency, availability of materials, and the school should be willing to show you what they do. So we do use restraint, we use seclusion. We are very open. It's a very small number of our students that actually ever receive any of these interventions. It's usually around 10% of the students that are enrolled with us or less, and even less that it happens 10 times or more. But schools should be willing to show you what it looks like and invite you in to look at it. There should be video available, preferably with sound, and that should be something that they're willing to share with the parent. Just they probably won't turn it over, but they should be willing to sit down with you and review it. But you can look at some of the websites about some of these different training systems, and the things to look for is, are they using principles from behavioral science? Is it a comprehensive training? Is it a multi-day training? Is it something that they train every year? And is it something that they're comfortable sharing with the parent? So those are the keys that I would look for there. And then on that note, so about to introduce Miss Miller, but I just wanted to say, if you're looking for a school setting, you're probably in the beginning of this journey. Isn't it too early to talk about transition? One of the things that we really believe is that if you're going to look at a program, the first question you should ask is where it ends. What does this all lead to? And sometimes that can be really hard when you're in the beginning of something that's really difficult. But if you're looking at schools, even if your child is young, and some of the schools that specialize only in younger children, you won't see this present, but they should at least be familiar. Are they thinking about outcomes? Are they thinking about where your child's going to be down in the third grade, but when they're 23, when they're 33? And so that should be part of the thinking the entire time, and the whole thing should chain together. So yes, asking about transition services and their philosophy, even when you're in elementary school, very important and very telling for the school that you're in. So Katie, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Aaron. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Miller. I'm the educational director at the high school, like Aaron said. So in many ways, we are a continuation of Sandy's program. And so we have all the same elements that were described up to this point. So what am I going to talk about? What do I have different to offer? Well, I am going to focus on transition. And Aaron put it really nicely that if your child is 6, if your child is 10, why are we talking about transition? Well, I did want to share a little story that my career in special education started in a preschool. And I remember the day when I thought, I wonder where my student will be when he is 30, because I worked in the profession and I didn't really know. Luckily, I had a fantastic mentor in that classroom who was focused on adult outcomes, even in the preschool. And so we went over what some of the adult options are. And I remember her saying to a parent of a 6-year-old, that behavior might be cute now, but it's not going to be cute when he's 16 or when he's 23. And that really kind of framed things for me. And it was they had rapport. It was a good conversation, but it was a reframing of, yep, they're young, but let's use this time to our opportunity. So at the high school level, sometimes parents say, why are you talking about transition? They've been here for 1 week. Well, that is what we do. We may have students for 4 years. We may have students for 6 or even 7 years at the high school. And in many occasions, that's not enough time to fully prepare. So we have adjusted what we do at the high school so that when students cross that graduation stage, the families and the student know where they're going the next Monday, and they feel good about where they're going. Because aside from picking the school for your child, transitioning from a school age program to the world of adult services is one of those big life decisions that you will make with or for your child. And it's not something that should be an afterthought. So no, it's never too early, and it is commonplace for us to start the transition discussion day one. I will talk about a lot of the different steps along the way. It can feel really daunting. It can be overwhelming. There's a lot of new lingo for parents of children beginning the transition journey. Things like DDA, funding, vocational assessments, things that you're not familiar with, but hopefully you'll find a school that has someone that will guide you through that process. The other thing that's really important to think about before we even start talking about what the transition process looks like and how a school can assist you is it's very, very important that you remember that this is your journey for your child and for your family. By the time you get to the high school level with your child, you may have developed friend groups, or you might have a good network of people that you're friends with who have some shared experiences. Just remember that your best friend or your neighbor or your friend from your support group, their journey may be different than yours. And it's very important to really ask those questions ahead of time of, what is it that we see for our family? It is very important to kind of frame your thought process. Is your child going to access post-secondary schooling? Is a day program in the cards for them? Are they going to work in the family business? That's all going to be crucial as you work with your school team into transition. And once again, the process will take years. It's meant to be that way. Pace yourself. Know that this process will ebb and flow. There will be some years where you're visiting programs, filling out forms, doing a lot of that front work, and then there are times where the work really falls into the school's responsibility, and we're working on things. So, Erin, we can go to the next slide. All right. So, what should you be looking for if your child is getting close to the getting close to the age where he really needs to start focusing in, doubling down on transition? So for us in Maryland, 14, that's sort of the number that people go by. We obviously start the transition discussion earlier, but for the high school, from day one, like I said, we're starting to talk about where are they going to go when they graduate. You want to find a school that makes transition a priority. This shouldn't be an afterthought. This should not be one person in the basement who works on transition for students. All of the professionals that we talked about should know that we're creating a culture of transition for our students. So at Kennedy Krieger High School, we see transition opportunities in academics. we really start focusing on functional academics, compensatory strategies, all the things that maybe our children will need when they exit. For some of our kids, it may be filling out applications for jobs, and other students, it might be safety signs. The biggest takeaway, if you haven't picked it up already, is you're looking for a program that is not one size fits all. If you're talking to a program and they say, this is what we do for all of our kids, this is what we do for all of our kids, that should be a red flag. You should have sort of a base model of a program, and the professional should be able to differentiate and immediately pull out of their toolboxes. Oh, for a kid with this profile, we might try this, but if that doesn't work, we have a few more options. So make sure that you find a school that is willing and able to differentiate and individualize a program for your child. So transition should be part of academics. It should be part of their social experience, like Tasha mentioned. What are students doing in their downtime? How are they interacting with their peers? What are the social interactions look like behaviorally? We focus on things with our students, like we start changing the script a little bit. So we might say, would it be okay to hit your roommate? Or what would your boss do if you yelled at them like that? And that becomes a little bit more naturalized because we do provide both daily living opportunities for our students, but also industry and vocational training. So you want to look for a school that provides work readiness skills. For our school, we provide 5 different industry clusters where a student can essentially
if you could just clarify, because our audience is all severe and profound autism, and very few of them have work skills at all. So maybe if you could explain what is really relevant to these families.
Sure. So one of the things that we work on in our vocational training for our students who are more sort of on the severe side is working independently. So we really focus on independent workstations. So being able to work for a set period of time with a task, and we increase the length of the task so that the students are able to stay in an assigned area. They're able to follow picture directions. But once again, that will really vary from student to student. But the students are still included in our industry area. So if they have an interest in things that you might find in stores, they will be working on skills in the school store setting, horticulture, things like that. One of the things that we talk a lot about with our staff is making sure that we push students and families slightly outside their comfort zone. It is our job during the school day to push our students to slightly before frustration so that they are learning every single day. If you're looking for a program, you want to make sure that the team is comfortable with really pushing, and what's the next benchmark? What's the benchmark after that to get to the goal? And sometimes that pushing slightly outside of the comfort zone comes in with those early discussions with the parents, as far as where do you see your child in 5 years, 7 years? That's a really difficult discussion, especially if you're just getting into the high school experience and all of a sudden we're talking about what do you see for your child for when they leave here. Most parents are like, oh, hold up. No, we just got here. But it is really important that through a collaborative approach, sort of this give and take, is your child gonna be with you during the day? Are they gonna go on a bus and they're gonna go to a day program? And that is key in our development of programming for your child, because the skill sets might be different. That's why the collaborative approach with the parent is key from the very beginning. Erin, you can go to the next slide.
And I see a question. We'll make sure that we circle back and answer that question in the chat.
So when we're talking about transition, as I mentioned, you want to employ folks who are dedicated to guiding transitioning youth and their families. That once again, it should not be an afterthought. It's really important that the folks who are guiding this journey for you and your child are knowledgeable of the adult service climate. As you may or may not be aware, things change from year to year, depending on current legislation, what's going on in the government, where the funding is. And it's very important that if you're checking out a school and you ask about who is guiding the transition process, that it's clear that the person who is doing that is familiar with the adult service climate. It's also really important that they've built relationships with the local adult service provider programs. For example, one of the things that we do is that we will go out to all the different programs and learn what the day looks like. The reason we do this is that in order to best prepare our students for what their day might look like, or we might go out to see a family who is doing their own program within the home. We really look at the skills needed. And sometimes it's, being able to sit independently. It might be advocating for a break. It could be asking for assistance. But it's really important for us, in order for us to build the program of transition, for us to know what the end goal is. And as families, that would be an important step for you as well. If you have children who are of transition age, it would be good to become familiar with what programs are out there and understand, what would a day look like. One of the other things that it's really important that the person guiding the transition process understands is funding sources, deadlines, and has a clear transition timeline. So for the transition process, about 2 years out, that's when agencies often pick up a student. So an external agency will come into the IEP meeting and start talking about the vocational process and connecting with agencies and what that's going to look like, and career assessments, things along those lines, which are all brand new to families, and it can be brand new for the school as well. But there are certain deadlines in order to submit applications for funding and things like that. And if you have someone dedicated to that process on the school team, you're able to get from point A to point Z much easier. And then the other component at the very bottom there, the willing to train others. So I am by no means an expert in the transition process, but I'm familiar because our transition specialist makes sure that he goes out to all of the different parts of our program and explains it to staff so that we all are aware of the deadlines, the applications, what's involved, because it is totally, it's a village. We all have to kind of work together to make sure that we are building academic, behavioral, social programming that supports the process. And next. Another thing that a school might provide, which is sort of like the extras, if you have a child of transition age, would be, like I said, they may provide transition timelines or checklists, things that you should be doing at home. We're not going to get into that. That's a totally different webinar. But like I said, there are timelines and checklists. But when your child turns 18, there are other things that are really important when they go from child age to adult age. And does a school provide workshops, or do they connect families with programs or workshops that talk about funding sources, SSI, MA? What impact is that going to have on your child as they turn 18? Are you going to file for guardianship? And what does that mean in regards to healthcare agent, power of attorney, if there's any estate planning that needs to be done. It's really nice to build this collaboration with external resources and the families. And then finally, disability rights and legal issues. Turning 18 is, like I said, it's a game changer, and having someone who can guide the process and provide the resources to the family is really crucial as you're transitioning from school age to adult age.
All right, and I got one question, and I think between Katie and I, we can answer it. Question is, how do you foster inclusion of your profoundly autistic and non-speaking students with the rest of your school community? So I'll start by saying that Katie runs a career and technology center, but that doesn't mean that the students there, that we don't have students who have profound autism. We do. And so those students are participating in the way that is most meaningful to them. And that can look really different across the students. That's one of the things that people are most surprised by the Kennedy programs, is that we serve a very broad range of students. We do have some other programs that are highly specialized, serving only students with the most profound autism, but there's an overlap in the enrollment in the schools. So close approximations to what work looks like. So in some ways, some of the activities that students who have a more complex needs, they may be engaged in something in the career tech area, the work prep area, that is much, much, much more functional, but they're included to the greatest extent possible. They might have a one-to-one assistant. They might have two-to-one assistants. That's not uncommon, but we'll still have them engaged in the career and technology setting as well.
Absolutely. So as an example, one of our student-run businesses is our school store. And the jobs that you'll find in there is everything from cashier, bagging, stocking, greeting. And every student has an opportunity to participate. And we just provide the external scaffolding and support to meet the students where they are. So many of our students work on stocking, and for some students, it might be a checklist and they're able to put items on the shelf. Others require, visuals where they match to same. And other students may require some external support from an aide or additional adult support. But we want to make sure that our students have the opportunity to participate in the job opportunities that we've offered in the school. Eventually, sometimes we'll find some skills that stand out, and that might become their day-to-day job on most days, but we don't really stop there. We want to make sure we continue to expand those skills. And then in the classrooms, a lot of times they're working on those prerequisite skills of match the same color. And so that might mean that the pencil is, it's a purple pencil, and we put a purple piece of paper on the shelf, and they're just, they're matching the same, but we really focus on making it functional. And if we're lucky, we're able to pull back that external scaffolding, and they're able to do the skill much more independently. End of the day, we're really working on increasing independence for our students and increasing self-advocacy. So in the event that they, like Tasha said, instead of running out of the school store because they don't like what they are doing, they might be able to point to something that says, I need a break, a picture that says, I need a break. But we're kind of working on all of those skills at once. That makes sense.
We have a real lot of questions in the Q&A. I know we're over time, but I'd like to run through as many of them as we can. If you could keep your answers as short as possible. What is the cost per year for DSM level 3 autistic adult? I think they're referring to KKI, but I guess it could be any program.
So that for adult programming, so that's a really complicated question, and I'm not trying to avoid it. First, it's different across states. Funding mechanisms are different. The money comes from CMS and then goes to the state. So if you're in a particular state and you'd like some more information, please send that to me. It depends whether the adult has one-to-one services, what kind of services that they're accessing. Is it a day program? It is a day habilitation program. So I can't answer a question that's quite that broad. I apologize.
It's very high. I
It's
just
very
know
expensive.
in the Bay Area, the costs can easily exceed, including transportation, easily exceed $200,000 a year. I can't speak for other programs. Are safety rooms or sensory rooms used as part of behavior management? And are those rooms continuously monitored?
So
I
I
can
can speak to the sensory room if you want to speak to
Sure.
the safety room. So we look at those as two different things. So we have sensory rooms that are about sensory integration for students. So you might think about chairs with rocking motion, fiber optic lights, like our OT gym, we have a swing, or deep pressure. We have like a deep pressure canoe that students can climb in to get that sensory integration, sensory diets that tend to be monitored and led from an occupational therapist. Our safety rooms are something different.
Yeah, we have we refer to them as behavioral service suites, or but we do use the term seclusion just because of the use of a quiet
I
room.
think
Or
that's what he's referring to here is the use
so,
of
yeah,
seclusion room, like, if there's an event that involves dangerous behaviors and you
yeah.
need
So
to keep people safe.
continuously monitored, also monitor on video. The video is stored in a loop for a set amount of days in Kennedy's programs, and that's where I was saying that schools should be open and inviting parents in to look at that so they can actually review the behavior. But it needs to be, in my opinion, and legally in some states, both on video, and the student should also be visually, manually observed at all times if they're in a seclusion room. And then, of course, if there's any sort of physical intervention, it should be, two people or more, and there should be someone who's also supervising or observing that interaction, who's able to describe, the response of the student, because we need to know you might use an intervention out of necessity for safety, and it really needs to be safety, not convenience to the staff or preference, but also to try to determine whether any of those interventions have become contraindicated for the student. And that's something that we talk about every year, and we talk about each time one of the interventions is used.
All right. What can you talk about the IQs of the students that you serve? Like what's the range and among your various programs?
I can speak to the high school level. As Erin mentioned, we have both a diploma track and certificate track. So at the high school, we have some students who are falling within average to low average range. In our certificate program, we also have a wide range of abilities. On paper, some of our students may function in months, presenting at a 6-month, 8-month, 12-month level, and kind of everything in between.
Okay. Do any schools support level 3 autism and mental health needs when the student has an intellectual disability? I've been looking and found nothing. She doesn't say what region of the US she's in, but basically it sounds like this is a job for your search tool.
Yeah, I would take a look. We certainly have students who have autism and other, conditions, and we actually have seen an increase in students with autism who have other, either psychiatric or, um, you know, psychological disorder as well. So it's very complex, and it's difficult to find a student or a school that will appropriately serve those students, but they do exist.
Okay. If staff doesn't know what they're doing, what recourse do parents have?
Well, that's a difficult question. Of course, I always say that you've got to take it back to the IEP table. And if this is in a public school setting, most of our parents, by the time they're enrolled in a non-public school, have experienced this multiple times. And some of our biggest bridges to cross are to reduce the sort of that fight rather than flight on the part of the parents because they're used to staff members who really don't know what they're doing. So calling an IEP meeting, collecting that data so that it tells the story, and really painting that picture that the staff, the lack of training, I'm not going to, judge the person, but clearly if they're not trained, they don't know what they're doing, that is impeding access to FAPE. The child is entitled to free and appropriate public education. And if the staff isn't providing the supports to enable them to receive that, that's a FAPE issue and it goes to the IEP table. I know it's much easier to say than do, but that's the challenge.
Yeah, I know many families that have had to call, mid-year IEPs to address, sometimes they're classrooms that have no teacher, sometimes for months on end, and they'll bring in, a substitute here, a substitute there, or they'll have an aide serve as the teacher, and like basically it's a complete chaos disaster. And that's not unusual because of the staffing shortage, I think. Okay, so what expectations should we have for the security, protection, and privacy of our non-speaking children? Kind of a broad question. Not exactly sure what she means.
I think they should have a high expectation. One of the things that I'll just make a quick comment on is that one of the things we work with our parents is the use of Angel Sense and other recording devices. It's illegal to record someone in the state of Maryland without their permission, and that presents a difficulty for parents who, they're not bad actors. They just want to know what's going on in the classroom, and they've got children that don't speak. So, they should expect the right to observe the classroom, to, observe more than once, to have discussions with the staff members involved. Of course, they've got to expect that the rights of the other students and parents are also respected. But it's a difficult position for parents. And it's another one of the reasons why, and especially in our behavioral service suites, where the use of video has been, when we first installed it, people were concerned about it. And really, it's been nothing but helpful. We're able to really demonstrate what we've been doing and the response, and often we can get insight from the parents as well as from other team members. So in most cases, you can expect that you're going to be allowed to have a recording device individually into the classroom because you're going to need permission in most states. But observation is definitely something you should be asking about.
All right, let's just try to squeeze in two more. Any tips for finding programs in low resource areas? I don't see any programs in my state on the provided websites. Excuse me.
Well, I'll take that, and I don't want to. I don't have good suggestions. As far as programs like ours, part of NAPSAC, there are regions where they're really richly served, and then there are areas where we are underrepresented. And so Kennedy Krieger recently opened a school, and even though Maryland's a tiny state, we opened a school in Southern Maryland where there was really no access to programs like ours. Students were on the bus 3.5 hours, sometimes one way, which should never happen. We were able to do that, frankly, through support from our state legislature and also our federal delegation to give us the resources to open the program. And so a resource poor area, that's the only solution that I've seen is a push. Usually parents, legislators, providers push to open up that setting. And that's how Kennedy Krieger schools started 40 years ago, just literally on the hallway in the hospital, is that parents were pushing, and the organization responded. But I'm sorry to hear that there are areas that are really underserved.
I'm also wondering if you're in one of those areas, if you could contact maybe a university that's in that area and see if they have a school consultation program or an autism program, because there may be some expertise that could be provided to the school through the IEP process. So if the IEP could add a consultant who could work with that student's educational team, even in a regular education setting. So you wouldn't have the supports of a school like ours, but you might get some expertise in programming and doing meaningful inclusion for the student if there isn't a separate school set up for that purpose.
Finally, of course, there's a question about what happens when, school ends. And, this is, of course, the big elephant in the room here, which is IDEA compared to the adult system is much more lavishly funded. And what do you see? I mean, when you have a profoundly autistic student age out of your programs, I mean, are you the crisis we're seeing is quite acute nationwide in terms of families not being able to transition their child despite all good intentions in the program and by the family. What do you see, and what do you see about this growing population that will need more and more of these adult programs?
So there's a subcommittee that's part of the policy committee that I chair for NAPSAC, and it's about adult services. And our mission is IDEA for adults. There is no other solution. It's got to be funded. It's got to be funded in a way that's sustainable. We've seen some improvement locally as part of a COVID recovery, but for students with the most complex needs, placement is still difficult. Agencies are able to refuse placement. Often the wait times for placement in those agencies are very long. And again, like Katie mentioned, that if you're not in a program that started planning before you were supposed to start to plan and starting to having those discussions, it gets really difficult. So if we had a magic wand, we'd wave it for this one, but I really think there's the solutions legislative, and that we are seeing more students that are difficult to play. We were very lucky that our seniors that graduated this year, and Katie mentioned, they do run this range. We have one student who we were unable to place. We've also seen an increasing number of self-directed students and families. And then sometimes they're doing a magnificent job and they've really pulled everything together. And other times I think that they're self-directed because it's so complex that adult providers aren't willing to step in, and I become unsure of what's happening for that student. Our adult program is really a workforce development initiative, and so we do have students that are sometimes 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, but they're students who we are successful in at least in introducing to a workplace. So we've got to get together. We've got to create the IDEA for adults, especially with this growing population. It has to happen.
Jill, do you feel that our those who have joined us today are familiar with self-directed, or should we explain that a little?
I don't know. Each state is very different and they have different terminology and different programs, but basically, long story short, Medicaid dollars is what funds primarily, the adult programs. And the Medicaid dollars are increasingly flowing into self-determined or self-directed programs, where instead of you just signing up your kid with an agency, you pick and choose different programs in the community, and basically customize it for your child's needs. And it's been a popular alternative because, frankly, like here in California, we don't have a lot of traditional agencies that will serve our profoundly autistic kids. I mean, because they don't do one-on-one, right? So even my own son is 25. He's never been in an adult program because there are no programs that would accept him. And, so some families are finding some success, although it puts a lot of pressure on the parents who have to deal with sometimes insanely complicated mechanisms to effectuate these programs.
Yeah, and so many of them, the programs that, not to dive too deep in, I know we're past 8:30. Just the entire system, at least in Maryland, the one I've become really familiar with, that the payment is attendance based, so that if a client is sick for the day or sick for the week. We're just talking about illness running through the homes that the providers aren't able to build. They have difficulty maintaining the staffing, and the providers, many of them, sort of the system places them in the position where it's very difficult for them to serve the adults who need them most, because they, like at least in Maryland, when you start an adult agency, a DDA licensed agency, they ask you what your fundraising plan is, your philanthropic plan, in order to get a license. They just tell you right up front, we're not going to reimburse you at the level where you can actually be solvent. You're going to have to tell us how you're going to fundraise to support this. And that's not sustainable and more difficult the more complex the adult.
Yes.
And I see a question about Kennedy Krieger's. You're probably asking about the neurobehavioral unit. The wait list is long. There are many kids out there in need, and it's a small unit. So we are working on an access program across the organization, and we're seeing time to be seen, referral times are decreasing, but it's still an issue, no doubt. But I do encourage you to get on the website and do a little research and see what the wait lists are looking like.
All right. Well, we have really challenged people's time. I know it's really late there in the East Coast, a little less late here in California. Covered a lot of territory, and definitely, if you guys have further questions, I can definitely email Aaron, and Aaron can send those out and try to address them. And I will definitely put other important links in the show notes. But Theo, thank you so much for covering so much. It's a huge issue and could have taken days. We could have just talked about residential schools, which is a question we get a lot at NCSA with just residential. People are often desperate for residential placements, but covered a little more broadly. So thank you so much, everybody. I wish you a good night, and I thank you so much for your time and your assistance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll look for your questions.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And it's recorded. It will be up tomorrow, probably. All right. Good night.
Good night.